Welcome, everyone. We are live here on the show. As you all know, I've kind of been off the internet for a little while because I've been down south in Australia shooting a feature film out of internet range. But I have driven back tonight or today, this morning, my time, because I have a really exciting interview. I have Josiah Zayner, who is the founder and CEO of the ODIN, chatting with me today. Welcome to the show.
Yeah, no, it's great to be here. I'm
It's
a fan of your work.
I'm a fan of your work. You guys may have seen my video. I did do it like a CRISPR kit unboxing, and I tried to do the experiment. Failed miserably. It turns out I am not good at science, but had a lot of fun doing that.
Oh, don't blame it. Blame it on me, right?
Absolutely.
Poor design of the
What's wrong
kit.
with your kit?
Poor design.
Couldn't get it
Poor
to
kit
work.
design.
It's terrible.
We're working on it. We're working on it.
No, it was really really fun. So let's give people a little bit of background about what the ODIN is and who you are. So I mean, pulling up your bio here, you've done a huge amount of stuff. You've worked for NASA. You've done all kinds of things to do. Like you're a
Yeah,
leading researcher in the biohacking space, and I want to explain to people what biohacking is and why that's tremendously important right now. So just give us a little bit of a background about yourself.
all right. Yeah, so I did my PhD in biochemistry and biophysics from the University of Chicago, and what the motto there is where fun goes to die, and it's
Is that their official motto? Come join
no
us where
unofficial.
fun goes to die.
It's unofficial, but it's pretty much true. Graduate school is just like they treat you like slave labor and don't pay you anything. But I learned a lot, and I got a PhD out of it, so I guess I can't complain completely. But after I finished my PhD, I was like, the academic system really isn't for me. It's just there's it doesn't work well at all. And so I was like, I need to go do something else. And silly me, I was like, hey, maybe I should go work for the government. I bet things work better there.
They got all the smartest people. They got all the best people. And so
and
you worked for NASA, and how did that turn out?
yeah, so then I went and I got I wrote this like 15-page grant to NASA that was just like, I want to do all this stuff on Mars. And it sounds funny when you're writing it out because, like, who writes that out, like, for real in their everyday life? You're just like laughing to yourself. You're like, yeah, I just want to build like this structure on Mars. And you're just like, that's
I
weird.
like that you dream big. I appreciate that.
And they were just like, sure, why not? Like, come to NASA and work on this stuff. And my first 6 months there, it was just like, I was like, wow, this is so cool. I'm at NASA. Like, oh my gosh, awesome. And then it was just like so much bureaucracy for everything. Like, literally, one of the things they told me is like, you can't work in the lab every day because it's dangerous. You might get hurt if you work every day. So just work like 4 days a week, and one day, like, don't work in the lab. And I was like,
Hey
what?
guys, there's your taxpayer dollars at work. You are
I was
funding
like,
people to just not work.
I know it didn't make any sense. I was just like, huh. And I looked around and like nobody came to work, and my boss, he came to work maybe like once a month, not even joking. Like one Friday a month, he would show up. Yeah. And he was working another job.
I mean, it's funny. You probably don't have a lot of people complaining about that because you've got a sweet gig like that where you're like, I'm just gonna
Oh, it was
have a
so
lot of leisure
sweet. It was
time.
so sweet. That's the
So
thing. It was,
you that grated on you, and you decided that wasn't for you.
yeah, well, you know what? I was just like, ah, gosh, if I was like, later in my career, it would have been awesome because then you just like sit there and chill and like, there is some interesting stuff going on there for sure. And they do let people dream big. Um, but like right now, my career or when I left a couple years ago, it was just like, I want to try to do something, not just like sit around and collect a paycheck
Yeah.
uh, and work
That's
for
a
NASA.
very unusual perspective that is quite rare, I found. I actually
Yeah,
want
no,
to do
maybe.
something.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, so I went and I left and I started my own company, the Odin, and we sell genetic engineering kits and run classes, teach people how to do genetic engineering and CRISPR and all this cool stuff.
Yeah.
It's really awesome. A lot of work. I wouldn't recommend anybody doing a startup, but you know, it's worked out well and things are going pretty good now.
So let's talk about the ODIN and let's talk about your work there. So I actually bought a CRISPR kit like a couple of years ago, maybe a year ago now, from your site. I did it all. Like the problem with me and science is I'm not that like specific. It's kind of like cooking where I'm like, oh, a little more flour, sure, the recipe says this, but I'll do this. And so I was kind of like wasn't too specific with this stuff, but had a lot of fun doing it because I got to wear like a mask and I got like petri dishes and little pipettes. I practiced my pipette technique, so it was really fun.
I mean, that's the thing, and you learned something, right?
I absolutely learned stuff, and I learned how CRISPR works. So walk through this for my audience, what this new tech is and why it's groundbreaking and going to change the world and completely going to change like everything we understand about having children and, you know, living with disease, and everything is going to change now that we have this technology. So give us a bit of a background there.
Yeah, so people who are familiar with programming is kind of like before in genetic engineering, in the genetic engineering world, everything was like in Fortran or like assembly language. And people are trying to write like graphical user interfaces using like Fortran and assembly language. And so you can imagine it's super tough and complicated, right? Like it's so hard to do that. It takes a lot of time, a lot of effort. It's possible, totally possible, but it takes a lot of time and effort. And then out comes, you know, CRISPR, which is more like something like Visual Basic or something like that, where it's just like, whoa, now it's really easy to program these graphical things and you don't even really need to know anything. You can just pick what gene you want to engineer and do it. It doesn't require any effort. You know, you just have to pay a little bit of money to get the DNA sequenced or synthesized, not sequenced. And it's kind of revolutionized things because it sped everything up a ton. It sped up stuff so much, and it works in most organisms, which is also crazy. So it's kind of like almost a universal engineering programming technique for organisms. And it's crazy the stuff that people are able to do with it. Like recently, a researcher in China, he engineered embryos and implanted them into human beings. And as far as we know, they became babies. And that's crazy, right? So like people are engineering humans, genetically modifying them with this technology. And it's just like, oh gosh, all of our sci-fi fantasies are going to come true.
Well, also sci-fi nightmares as well. So I copped a lot of flack when I put up that video and people are like, what? You're just going around genetically engineering these things? You're going to create the apocalypse and create these new diseases. And so like walk me through some of these concerns that people have.
Oh man, I just can't imagine if like automobiles and vehicles were invented in 2019. Everybody would be like, but they kill millions of people a year. Like, how can we survive with this technology? And you're like, because it's so amazing. Without automobiles, like, world would be crazy because nobody would be able to get anywhere in any reasonable amount of time. And it's just changed the world like that. And I think the thing is, every technology has its downside, right? Mm-hmm. If you sit here and ask me, like, is genetic engineering ever going to be used for bad? You know, I would be a really bad liar if I said, no, it's going to be, right? Yeah. It's going to be for sure. Every technology is used for bad. It doesn't matter if it's a...
Cryptocurrency going to be used for bad things? Yeah, probably as well. It also gives a tremendous amount of freedom for people.
No, totally. That's the exact same thing, right? People tend to focus on the negative of it instead of like, wow, what can we do with this, right? Like with cryptocurrency, it's like, especially nowadays with people being deplatformed and other crazy stuff going on, it's like, wow, like I am more invested in cryptocurrency than ever before because it's just like, whoa, but the same thing is happening with genetic engineering where people are like, the government's like, oh, you have disease? Well, you can't do what you want, right?
Yeah.
We're
So
going to
let's talk
control.
about, yeah, let's get into that side of things. So, and speaking of like being deplatformed, just to let everyone know, as always, I am feeding my live stream through bitbacker.io. So if you have any questions for Josiah, then feel free to send a power chat or check out that site. You don't need to have an account to use it, and it's super easy. So just added that link in there. But let's talk about why biohacking is really important in today's like climate of like super regulation and FDA overreach, I would say. And let's talk about, I mean, just to give people a bit of background, you have done a lot of experiments on yourself. And you've tried all these different things. You really believe in the ethos of just trying things out, doing science in your garage, and finding, you know, answers to things. And you've found remarkable things. So you made incredible discoveries, and people have written to you and said, "Can you help me? I have a month to live." And it's illegal for you to give advice on this stuff, things that could actually be helping people, but your hands are tied because there's such strict regulation around all of this stuff. So like talk us through some of the biggest hurdles like that you found through the FDA, for example, that stop people from experimenting, and why this is bad.
Yeah, well, like Meta Meme Machine said, you know, trying to create the umbrella corporation here, and the government's just trying to hold me back, you know. No, not really, but that would be cool, you know. I want to make people with superpowers who live forever and crazy stuff. But I hope I don't cause a zombie apocalypse. But if I do cause a zombie apocalypse, I hope that I have a bunker and lots of weapons by that time. So, you know, there's a lot of caveats here. But so one of the big issues is that the government in the US and in pretty much every country in the world is not a big fan of body autonomy, right? They want to regulate what we can put in our bodies, what we can do to our bodies, which is funny. I read something recently where somebody was like, the government doesn't give us rights. They just allow us to do stuff that they took away the rights for us to be able to do. Right.
So, oh my God, I got a tax rebate. Well, that was your money. They just decided to give a portion of it back. Okay.
Yeah, or like when people are like, oh, they legalized cannabis, but it's like, yeah, but they made it illegal in the first place. You know, it's pretty funny with a lot of these things. And the same is true for medicine a lot, where they're like, look, you can't try out controversial experimental medicines on yourself, and we don't want people to be able to provide them for you. Yeah. And I get I think it comes from a good place. You know, they're like, just like, oh, we're trying to protect people from being taken advantage of. And people get taken advantage of in every technology, right? Everything people get taken advantage of, even stuff that's legal.
Even stuff that's regulated. Bernie Madoff was in a completely regulated environment. That all happened, and you know, people are defrauded all the time. The housing crash, the bailing out of the banks. That you know, like that's something that the government decided to do, and that seems criminal to me. So it's a strange environment with the FDA because currently, they can control what can go out to market, what people are allowed to do, medicines that people are allowed to try. So, for example, individuals don't have the right to try at the moment, and that's being fought in the government. There are people making tremendous progress there, and it's really come a long way in the last 5 years there. And I think even in some states, you could probably tell me a lot more about this. It's getting a lot better, but the idea was that the government says basically blanket rule, nothing is allowed unless we've specifically given something approval. So if there's a cutting edge drug out there that someone's working on, you don't have the right to say, well, I have a week to live. Why the hell not? I'm just going to try this thing. They actually take away that decision from you.
Oh no, it's just absolutely insane. And what people don't understand is that the FDA has created this really strange environment that's completely market driven to where like they are highly selective of people they accept into clinical trials now, right? Because they want their drugs approved. So what they do is they screen people so hard to get into clinical trials because they want there to be the highest chance that this drug is gonna help you. So if it looks like you're terminal or something like that, you're most likely never going to be accepted to a reasonable clinical trial, right? And not only that, like when they say like, oh, well, you can get drugs through compassionate use or right to try or things like that, it doesn't even work because companies don't want to give out drugs to people who are going to die because then their stock prices are going to bomb. So they never do. I know so many people who have cancer and other diseases that have gone to these companies and said, hey, you know, you have this drug that's shown promise in clinical trial. I'm dying. Can I have it? And they just don't respond or don't help them or say, no, we can't give it to you. And that's crazy, right? And I get it. I get it that like the way the system is set up in the government has made it so that these trials are tied to stock prices and things like that. But like, there's got to be a better way, right?
What about just having FDA as saying like, we are a auditing mechanism that will give you a tick of approval. You know, if you want to use a drug that, you know, has our tick of approval, then that's going to give you more confidence in the drug. But you're also welcome to use other ones that don't have our tick of approval. You just have that risk on yourself. But they don't allow that. They say absolutely no way. These other things are illegal. You can't go near them. You can't try them. Who cares if you're terminal? And it creates a crazy system. I also just want to say shout out. I just got an anonymous power chat through BitBacker. $1 in Bitcoin Cash. Thank you so much. But they just sent the number 1. Maybe it's cryptic and they want us to elaborate on that. And I'll wait for them to explain. But thank you. I appreciate it. But let's talk about like you.
Let us know what that means.
Let us know what that means.
We're curious.
So you did some experimentation with gene editing on yourself where you injected your muscles and like you found that you grew muscle mass. And is that have I got that correct?
Well, so I did so let's, you know, if we go back to the FDA and we talk about the FDA, so like if I want to provide gene therapies to people or even test out gene therapies on humans, it's so heavily regulated. It's virtually, you know, you have to have, you know, tens, hundreds of millions of dollars to be able to do these things with, you're not even guaranteed an outcome of success or you're being able to go to the market or anything like that, which is crazy. But there is some loopholes in the FDA that allow for self-experimentation because generally when a drug is tested on somebody, there needs to be somebody who can bring charges against the company or the person, right? So like if I give somebody a drug and they die, then their family can sue me. If I give a drug to myself and I die, like I'm not going to sue myself or my family's not going to try to sue.
Depends how you're feeling.
Dead me will try to sue live me.
God damn you, Josiah, why did you inject me with that thing? So you talk me through that experimentation that you did with your muscles.
Yeah, no. So what happened was I was like, all right, you know, human gene therapy it works, right? So we've been working on human gene therapy since the late 90s. We know that a lot of it works. A lot of experimentations are published. They've been in phase 1, phase 2 clinical trials, some even like phase 3 clinical trials or further. And we know that it works, right? We know certain things that work. It's not a question of whether gene therapy works. This is not a question. It's just like, how do we get it to people? How do we get it to work more efficiently and stuff like that? So I really wanted to see this. So I started experimenting on myself, just literally in my garage doing experiments by injecting myself with DNA and also viruses. So one of the ways they do gene therapy is they use these like deactivated viruses that like don't replicate and spread through your body, but they're really good at infecting your cells. So you can put like whatever DNA you want in your cells with these viruses. So I put in a bunch of different DNAs, you know, DNA from a jellyfish and other things. I think I'm the first human jellyfish hybrid out there. So woo!
I was wondering, there's something different about this guy. Now that makes a lot more sense. It's part jellyfish.
Right? No, those cells are probably gone because you know you want to test it, so you have to do biopsies from your body and stuff like that. What I found is that it really is possible to do gene therapy in a garage on a budget and all this stuff, which is totally crazy and amazing that we can do these things, right? And it's just ever since then, I've been trying to get this word out to the world that like, look, genetic engineering and gene therapy is possible, but like I can't sell you the product because I will go to jail, right? The FDA will come kick down my door, you know, confiscate all the property of my company and make it illegal. And it's just like, so the only other way to do it is kind of try to teach people how to do genetic engineering, right? Like with the CRISPR kits and other stuff, so they could learn the process, learn what's actually going on, and maybe, you know, figure something out for themselves.
Yeah. No, it's super interesting, and looking at the wave of like biohacking that you're sort of at the forefront of. Like you're a strong advocate of people just going and experimenting and trying out things because at the moment in the current regulatory climate, there's little innovation as you laid out. It's really hard to get things through. It's very hard with like current controls to have
Well,
incentives.
you want to know what's crazy? Yeah, you want to know what's crazy is that like so the FDA, if you were trying to treat a normal disease, let's say you wanted to create a new drug for like diabetes or something like that, right? The regulatory process for that is going to take you like 8 to 10 years. And not only that, you have to show that it's better or, you know, like equal to or better than any existing drug on the market to get approval, right? Which is like super expensive and costs so much money. So what every company ends up doing is they find rare diseases or what they call first in class drugs, which are drugs that are the first drug to try to treat a disease. And what happens is the FDA fast tracks those drugs. And if you get approval, they give you a fast track voucher. So if you want to try to get another drug approval, you can use this voucher, kind of like a get out of jail free card. And those vouchers on the open market go for like $150 million. So you can sell the voucher. Right? So the incentives are to only go after really rare diseases or diseases that nobody's tried to treat yet. And most diseases that nobody's tried to treat yet are, you know, rare diseases because all the ones that affect a large portion of the population people go after. So it's like the incentives are totally against people who have any sort of common disease. And it's just like, it's terrible. It's crazy the way it's incentivized like that.
Yeah, no, that's insane. And so you've done some work and released videos with your experiments, and people have written to you and said, "Listen, I have a week to live. I have a month to live. I have 6 months. We are not getting anywhere with the FDA. Like, there's no drugs out there for me. I'm going to die. But what you're doing may be a hope for me." And it's actually illegal for you to give these people advice, any sort of like walking through of the process you went through on yourself. What's that like?
Yeah, no, so it's really tough, you know, like, because I want to try. It's, oh gosh, it's so heavy and rough, right? When somebody emails you and is like, I have some disease or some issue and I'm suffering really bad. Because number one, like if you're reaching out to me, some crazy guy on the internet, you know, I'm like your last hope, right? Most people probably don't come to me first. They probably go to the drug company.
Pope Jellyfish Man.
I know, right? Like Break Even Bitcoin said, you know, I'm just gonna like sting people, right? Stinging handshakes. That's what all I can do now. No, but like yeah, it is crazy that I get so many emails and messages just like a day. So many. And there's nothing I can do. Most of them I just don't respond to because like what can I say? I can't just keep writing over and over again. Sorry, there's like nothing I can do to help right now. And you know, it just grates on me day after day after day. And there's a lot of thought and interest going into like how can you set up systems using, you know, Bitcoin and cryptocurrency, and like maybe countries that don't have medical regulations like the Dominican Republic and places like that, where you can maybe go and help people and make it so that like you can't be stopped by a government, because there are literally, like, I could pirate gene therapies that have been through clinical trials that we know work for like muscular dystrophy and stuff like that. It's easy to reverse. And if you have a PhD in like, you know, a few hours, I can reverse engineer a gene therapy that treats muscular dystrophy that's been through phase 3 clinical trial, right?
Wow.
And then I can order it for a few $1,000s. And I could give that to somebody who's suffering. But the thing is, in the US, there's just like, I would be in jail, you know, not long after, once word got out that it was going on.
Yeah.
So it's like, how do we find a system that's decentralized and free from regulation where people can make a choice themselves, or people, you know, can be autonomous? And that's, you know, that's what I'm really interested in right now.
Yeah, it's like this awful system at the moment where, I mean, you were saying that you're sure that the impetus or the reason that the FDA is doing this is noble. They want to protect people, you know, but that's always what a lot of different government agencies say. Like, oh, well, it's in your best interest. We'll make the decisions for you. And that sort of rhetoric, it just really, really bothers me. I think it was Friedman who said that, you know, don't judge a policy by its intentions, judge it by its actual consequences. And the consequences of this regulation put out by the FDA is that, yeah, sure, at the end of the day, you're creating a product that's been through a lot of trials, like 10, 15, 20 years of trials, hundreds of millions of dollars, billions of dollars put into this research. You know that it's safe. Great. We finally got a safe product. And how many millions of products that also could have been safe have just been stopped? How many millions of people have died in the process because they haven't had access to treatment that we know is out there, that we know people could be using if they wanted to, but the people who have those treatments aren't allowed to share it with people. The people who created those treatments aren't allowed to sell it to people who are willing to take a chance on themselves.
Yeah, no, it's so true, because like everybody's worried about this person who's going to get hurt from the drug, and nobody is worried about, like you said, the millions and hundreds of millions of people who are dying every year because they have no treatment. Like, what about those people? Shouldn't we be caring about those people also, instead of
Sorry, go ahead.
Instead of the hypothetical people who haven't even been hurt yet?
Yeah. It's like that's the perverse incentives at play, right? Because we can only ever see the people who die from a drug. That, you know, we always can see the direct consequences of something, and we don't see the indirect consequences or the things that might have happened if they hadn't had these policies in place. Like, you know, you think of the hundreds of millions of people who have died waiting for treatment, who have died because people aren't allowed to experiment. They're not allowed to try different drugs that people are offering. It's just illegal for them to even give it a go. Even though they're terminal, it's illegal for them to give it a go. And so, you know, we don't think about those numbers. No one ever prints that data and says how many millions of people has the FDA killed with all of these regulations.
I know, right?
You know, if people want the safety of saying, I want the FDA's tick of approval, that should be a choice for them. But it should also be a choice that if they don't want that approval, if they're like, hey, you know, I have nothing left to lose, I want to try this, they should be allowed to do that.
Yeah, no. Mark Gleason start a science-based society? Yeah, maybe, but like I even think modern science is a little to blame for all this stuff. But like if you think about something like a lot of drugs fail in clinical trials, not because they don't work, but because usually the placebo works just as well as the drug. How messed up is that? We understand this stuff so little that sometimes the placebo works just as well as the drug. And it makes you start to think like, what makes a drug, right? What can really help and heal people? And then you start thinking about like maybe market-driven pharma, market-driven drugs is the way to go. Because like you said, if the FDA just gives a check mark to companies, that's great. You can do that and people will buy stuff from you. And maybe you could have some government programs that, you know, help out some of these people, or, you know, mass market drugs like vaccines or something that are approved. But like in general, if you're a company and you're making a drug and you kill one person or two people or five people, like it's like if you're a airline company, your plane crashes, like nobody's gonna fly on you anymore,
Yeah.
right? Like, you know, I have I don't fly much to like you know, Russia and the Middle East and stuff like that, but like I'm probably never gonna take Malaysia Air, I'll tell you that, right?
Yeah.
If
So I
I ever
got
see that show up on Expedia, they're like cheap ticket Malaysia, I'm gonna be like, is there another one that's a little more?
yeah. So I got a power chat, an anonymous power chat. Someone says you shouldn't do genetic engineering unless you understand the science of ensouling DNA and the golden mean ratio, the cause for fractality, gravity, life force, bliss, implosion, rainbows, hydrogen. You may have to explain what this means. Please visit goldenmean.info or watch it. And then they sent a link, The Purpose of DNA, Dan Winter. So what can you decipher
Thanks,
what
Dan.
it
No,
is?
like unfortunately right now, I'll watch those videos later, but right now, obviously, we're having a chat, so I don't have time to go check out those videos. But you know, you know, it is really interesting because DNA is what makes us human, right?
Mm.
It's something that's like we view as defining humanity, and like engineering embryos and engineering humans, that essentially does create like a new a new type of human, a new species of human. It changes what it means to be human, right? If we start growing wings or genetically modifying ourselves to shock each other or glow, like Breaky Von Bitcoin was saying, like, are we still human? And what does that mean to be human? And all these things. And I think it's a really interesting question. And it is something we're going to have to come to grips with and, you
Yeah.
know, figure out.
And then on the one side, like, because you've got it's a double-edged sword, right? On the one hand, you think about this world, this kind of Gattaca world where, you know, there are different classes of society depending on how much like genetic engineering you have access to, and you can create like an ideal human and all of these things that could disadvantage others. But then you look at what's happening at the moment where people are already being born incredibly disadvantaged, people who are being born and only getting to live 5 years of their life because they have a terminal illness, parents that, you know, their entire lives are ruined because they've had a child that's died, you know, from something that they didn't need to die from. When you have genetic engineering now, we have opened up this world of possibilities where perhaps we could, you know, make sure that children aren't born with terminal illnesses. Maybe like we can ensure that they're not going to have something that kills them in their first year of life. That sort of thing could be incredibly empowering and bring a huge amount of joy to people as well. So like there are these definite two sides of the equation, and I think human reaction is always to kind of err on the side of, well, these bad things could happen, so let's prevent the bad things. I mean, there are some people out there who are like, well, these good things could happen. Let's give these good things every chance of, you know, every possibility of actually happening.
Yeah, no, it's totally true, right? And I think that's the problem is that like um yeah, I don't know, Legendre 007. I actually don't think people have done estimates on the net number of people who have died and like how many people have been saved. I think it's more, you know, like most of laws and things like that, it's more emotional than it is logical, I think. And I think it's probably pretty hard to estimate the number of people who would be saved. And, you know, a lot of bioethicists and stuff like that, what they say is that, like, oh, well, the majority of drugs that go through clinical trials don't even make it to market or something like that, don't even get approved. So what that means is that the majority of drugs people would try to sell wouldn't work or wouldn't do anything. But it's kind of a misnomer because drugs that work, it's not just working that gets things through clinical trials. The other thing is interesting is that, like, when you think about drugs and medicine, right now drugs are made for everybody, right? They're mass marketed. So a drug can't just help you. There's no room for individual based medicine, right? Personalized medicine. if a drug helps me and kills 9 other people, but it cures me, it's never going to make it to market, right? Never. And that's the problem, is that like we need to find a way that makes room for personalized medicine, not just for mass market medicine, and tries to help everybody.
And it's also the idea that humans are all so different as well. You know, what works for one person isn't necessarily going to work for the next person. And that's some of the issue that I have with a lot of the cures that are coming out, and a lot of the cures which are not making it to market, because there are some things that do work really well for some people, but because they don't work for everyone, they're not allowed to go to market. Like our individual, like our intestines, like everything is so unique. The, you know, microorganisms we've got inside of us, like it differs from person to person. And I mean, they found the cure for cancer like many times over, but it's not something that works for everyone, right? There are different cures that work for individuals, and they can't bring them to market because that's just the way the game has been set up.
No, it's totally true. And people, you know, there's all these conspiracy theories that the government's hiding a cure for cancer. And it's like, no, the government's just preventing anything from ever going to market.
Yeah, and people don't realize that. Like, people spout that all the time. Like, well, one day we'll find the cure for cancer. It's like, yes, we've already got there. Like, it's happened many times. And it's just, I mean, so what do you think the solution to this is? I mean, right now you're advocating people kind of test things out, but you're someone who has a PhD in this stuff. If I were to go into my basement and just start experimenting with like gene therapy, like I wouldn't get very far, because I just don't have the skill set. So where can people turn right now?
I don't recommend that like everybody try this stuff, because it's definitely knowledge based, right? It's like, I wouldn't recommend that if you're doing a blockchain startup or crypto startup and you don't know how to program, that you like do it, right? Because you're going to have to learn a lot along the way to get there. So it's a big thing I've been thinking of a lot lately, is like, how do you make a system, and maybe a system that doesn't exist in the US or some other place, that actually allows for this stuff? Because right now, in most major industrialized countries, like stuff like this isn't going to work, because you'd have to do so much to change the system that like nobody's going to be for it. And there's so many old people who have to die and get removed from politics before it will ever be allowed, right? So it's just like, and there are people who are suffering now. And I think, you know, one of the really big things that I appreciate about crypto and crypto movement and blockchain and things like that is that it's that like people are focused on not necessarily like, I want to create a new currency, which is cool and interesting, but like, how do I make it so that people can have autonomy, right? And I think that's a big one. And that's what I'm trying to figure out. How do we make it so people can have medical autonomy? To where like the patient can be protected, because you want the patient to be protected. You just don't want like people to die and there be no consequences. The company can be protected, because you want companies to be protected, because sometimes stuff happens that just like, you know, you go in and you get some injection and you die a few days later, but it has nothing to do with the injection. You want companies to be protected so they can't be like sued out.
Yeah.
And that makes it really complicated. You have to set up, it's more complicated than just like, all right, fly to the Dominican Republic and inject people and take their money.
Yeah. And people have tried doing that. You know, people have moved to St. Kitts and basically because they've got nowhere in America. And so they're like, okay, well, I'll try this somewhere else so that we can actually get somewhere. So you talk about this new industry, this biohacking world, as being the future, and the future we need to head towards. Like, this isn't something we should be afraid of. This is something we absolutely need to go out of our way to pursue, because right now the current system is just really broken. It's, you know, it's not good for people. It's not good for people who have illnesses. And so you talk about, you know, this do-it-yourself biohacking and this future where this could become a consumer industry. And that's really what you've tried to set up with the ODIN. You know, give them kits, show them how easy this stuff is, encourage people to experiment.
Yeah, well, I think about it a lot like computers and computer programming and stuff like that. You know, there are some, you can relate like computer programming with DNA programming, not completely, but they do have, some similarities. And if you could teach people how to do DNA program, like, look, like so much of the major tech, so much of the major software that has happened has come not from like corporations or like, academic research or things like that. It's come from people, right? Just random people. If you look at blockchain and Bitcoin, if you look at, Android, Linux, like the major operating system of our time, if you look at so much software that's been around, it's created by individuals. So like, how do we empower individuals? How do we take science that was centralized in an authority and decentralize it, right? To me, that's the cool thing about, crypto blockchain, is that it decentralizes things. And the world is moving towards things being more decentralized. So I want to decentralize the knowledge in genetic engineering, in science, and make it so that, people can innovate, people can do cool and new things. Yeah, no, totally. People have been doing this stuff since forever, Legendre. It's totally cool.
Yeah. So one of the experiments that you worked on and one of the kits that you can actually buy is for glow-in-the-dark yeast, which is really interesting. You can genetically modify something, it becomes glow-in-the-dark. You got a lot of pushback about this. FDA came after you and really targeted you and said you need to take off this wording because we could construe this as a food additive, and so you need to change this wording or things will happen. And you push back against them and you like asked, okay, what will happen if I don't change the wording? And so tell me like all the issues you've kind of had running up against decentralized bureaucracy.
Golden dark Vegemite, that's what break you on Bitcoin.
Oh, I've got Vegemite right here. I got my avocado toast and Vegemite. If you can make this golden dark, that would just be icing on the cake.
Maybe that's something I'll work on. I'll look into it. Golden dark Vegemite. That'd be funny because Vegemite is yeast extract, right? It's like it's made from yeast, so maybe you could make golden dark Vegemite. Huh? Interesting. By the way, you're getting none of the credit for that break on Bitcoin. You don't even have a real name, so sorry about that. Sorry. I'm going to take all the credit, but no, yeah. So it was really interesting with that. What actually happened was, people have been talking about engineering yeast for years to make it, with this jellyfish gene and glow, and nobody ever did it. So we went ahead and did it, and a journalist wanted to write an article about it, and they contacted the FDA because they were like, oh, I wonder what the FDA will say about this. And the FDA, of course, was like, whoa, you can't do this. It's a color additive. It's a food additive. Like, this is against the law. You can't market it as
I like the way that their reasoning is, you can't do this because it's against the law. As if like that's what imbues it with morality. Like, well, why is it against the law is the question that we should be asking. Why does the FDA have to approve food coloring? I mean, that just seems like the stupidest thing. Like, whoa, careful there. This food coloring hasn't been approved by the FDA. Like, it seems really crazy, right? That they're such a nanny organization that they're going after you because you bypass their authority and their control.
No, it's pretty funny. And the thing is that there's really nothing that they can do if you don't hurt anybody. And I like followed normal FDA procedure. The only thing I didn't do was like submit anything and spend a lot of money to try to get it approved. Yeah, I know you own me. I do try to take the credit, Legendre. I'm trying to take all credit here.
You can't read the chat because then it ends up that I'm just writing messages to you through the chat and you're just reading them. And like, this one, it's like, oh, we're also talking in person. Probably more efficient, but I'll keep writing to here as well.
Well, we could talk in person, but the chat also works. We can communicate.
No, but I want to know about like some of these issues you've had with FDA. Like you've come in conflict with them a bunch, and they really don't like you. True. They really don't like you.
They don't. After I did those experiments on myself, it was actually really interesting because they like updated their guidelines like a month after I did a self-experimentation with CRISPR, and they were like, oh wow, like before this CRISPR, we didn't know how to regulate it, but now we're going to say that like any use of CRISPR falls under our regulation. It doesn't matter what it is. And
Any use? Even
yeah, and
self-experimentation. So what does that mean for the future of like the kits that you sell and the work that you're doing?
well, it's not on humans, right? So when you do it on humans, that's what I mean. Like
I
any
see.
use
Yeah,
on
yeah.
humans. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh man, your people are trying to how much would you bid for me, Mark? You know, people are trying to buy me now. What's going on here? Like
Ignore the chat. You're going to get too many people in there. So if you guys want to ask a question, feel free to ask it through the power chat, and then we are happy to respond there. But
power
otherwise,
chat.
tell me about the things that have happened. And so they changed their guidelines because of you. They've threatened to seize your products. Like, is this an ongoing thing, like that you just have to deal with being in this industry? Because this is a very powerful,
Yeah, it
like,
is. It
industry
is.
that you're up
But I
against.
think it's any industry, right? Like any industry where you're doing something new, where there's no regulation for, you're going into the unknown. And it's interesting because a lot of venture capital money doesn't go into stuff like this. They really want to see you prove it before it'll happen because they're afraid that like somebody will just shut you down,
Yeah.
right? Because somebody could just slap down regulation and boom, your company's done. I think most of the stuff we do, we're pretty okay with. I think the FDA is probably gonna leave us alone because, and like I said, unless somebody can show that you actually hurt somebody,
Yeah.
it's really hard for them to go after people because public backlash, right? You know, and if they came and seized all of our property, the public backlash would probably be larger than the the people that they saved, and so it's not worth it at all.
Yeah.
And we try to do due diligence on all the stuff we do also. We try to not be haphazard and just throw stuff out there like our glowing yeast. We compared the gene sequence to all known toxins and all known allergens and all these other stuff just to make sure that like nobody would get hurt by it. And also we drank a lot of it ourselves. Actually, I did a TV show with T-Pain a couple months ago, and I sat with T-Pain and we drank some glowing beer. So, T-Pain approves.
So did that make you glow? Like, how did that, did it taste good? Did it change the taste at all?
It doesn't really change the taste. It mostly just changes the appearance of it. So it's just, you can modify any yeast. So like, you just buy some yeast from a brewing company, right, online, and you could get that yeast, grow it up, modify it, and then use it to make a beer. So you could make whatever flavor beer you want or whatever typical style beer you're used to making.
So can I visit you on the West Coast there, and we drink glow-in-the-dark beer and we eat glow-in-the-dark Vegemite? Is that a thing that we could
We'll schedule it.
I'll get my people to talk to your people.
Exactly.
It'll be great. Yeah,
Let's do it.
So do take me through some of the particulars of some of the experiments that you've done though on yourself, because I find them super interesting and I want people to know about some of this stuff. So let's talk about your work with your muscles, for example.
Work with muscles. So, I think a lot of the stuff I do, a lot of the stuff I've done has been very, it's not necessarily something that's new and crazy. Now, the CRISPR muscle injection I did was the first time CRISPR was used on a human being.
Wow.
Because, I came to this issue and like, CRISPR has been around probably since 2011, 2012, and everybody's like, "Oh my gosh, it's going to save the world. It's going to save humanity and all this stuff." And you're like, "Well, why the fuck are we not using it then? If
and
it's
then
going
no
to
one
save
was
humanity?"
doing anything with it. Yeah.
Yeah, I know. You're just like, it has never been used. It's still to this day, I'm still the only human to ever test a CRISPR, genetic engineering on myself. To this day, 2019, right? And that's crazy. I think I did the experiment, was it in late 2017. Yeah, it was in like October 2017.
And
And
what was the
still,
experiment?
yeah, so what I was trying to do was modify this muscle gene to make my muscles grow bigger, not because I wanted bigger muscles. Uh, it's because I wanted to, like, you can buy this stuff for like $500, $1,000, and you can try to genetically modify yourself, and that's crazy, right? And nobody's doing it, and it blows my mind. And you're just like, why is nobody doing this? And there's so many like successful experiments in animals, right? So many. And so it's just like, what are we waiting for? And obviously, we're waiting for the regulatory environment to make it proper. And still, it's 2019, and still, like, there is a company in the US, Editas Medicine, that's suggesting to use CRISPR to help treat a disease. But the disease, there's already been like 50 gene therapies that have been made. It's like, it's not a disease
Not
that needs,
groundbreaking. Yeah.
yeah, it's not a disease that needs treatment. It's just like so typical of pharma just to be like, we're going to go after this one disease that everybody knows works and everybody knows tested.
Yeah.
And it's crazy.
So
And
sorry, go ahead.
yeah, no, and it's just like, Mark Lundberg, gene therapy, it can't be
Well,
tested for. That's the thing. Like, when you use this gene therapy on yourself, like, you literally could not tell the difference between me and somebody who had natural mutations in their body. So, like, if you're in the Olympics or something like that, like, I have no doubt at some point in time that there have been people who've competed in sports or the Olympics who have been using gene therapy. And if you want, Bitcoin Cash, the power chat right now, and ask for my email address, and I'll help you win the Olympics.
Absolutely.
No, but it's serious. It's kind of funny, but it's kind of serious. Like, there's no way to test for this stuff, right? Like, I could give somebody a gene therapy, so a couple gene therapies that have been through, phase 2 clinical trials that we know could help them in sports, or in cycling, or in things like that. And like, ugh, it's got to be going on. And if it's not going on, that's crazy, because it's just like, it's so inexpensive, it's so reasonable.
I mean, it's not just like Olympics. You're talking about like people who have things like muscular dystrophy writing to you saying, I've lost all muscle mass. I have very little time left to live. This could save my life, what you've done. But your hands are tied. You can't respond to these people.
Yeah, no, it's terrible. And I do interact with some of these people on a somewhat regular basis. And it's super hard because, like, my hands are tied. Like, I have a family, I have a business. Like, I can't just leave all these things behind. And it sucks, because it comes down to the question, like, would you be willing to go to jail to save, like, people's lives, or like help people? And that's such a shitty situation that we have to be in as human beings. That, like, we literally have gene therapies that are about to be approved for muscular dystrophy that like, I can't give to people. I could easily copy them. I could easily, I like this whole idea that I've been thinking about of like pirating gene therapies, right? You just wait till a gene therapy makes it through phase 3 clinical trials, and then when they try to sell it for $1 million, you just pirate it, and sell it because it works. It works. So you just like reverse engineer it and sell it to people, and that's something that needs to be done.
I mean, it's currently the incentive structure is such that it's so expensive for these companies to go through the the FDA regulations, the clinical trials, and all that, because the hoops that they're forced to jump through are just insane. You have decades of trials. In the meantime, you have decades where people are dying from the things that, drugs that haven't been put to market. And, it takes so long and so much money that at the end of the day, these companies need to find ways to profit. They need to charge for these things to justify all these, all of these ridiculous hoops, right? But changing the system would mean that it's not as expensive to get these drugs to market. You could help so many more people if they didn't have all of these hoops to jump through. Like this idea, it's such a misdirection, right? This idea that the FDA is helping people and protecting them by making sure these things are safe, when in fact they're creating more barriers to entry. They're creating more barriers for consumers to get hold of products that they can't afford. They're creating all kinds of misaligned incentives, and it's just a terrible process that hurts a lot of people.
Yeah, you want to hear something really messed up? So there's this drug called Glybera. It was the first ever gene therapy approved. It was approved in the EU, and it treats this disease called lipoprotein lipase deficiency. It basically, these people have a mutation in an enzyme that breaks down fats. So their body just gets full of fats. And as you can imagine, it's really harsh on the body, right? Well, so they created this gene therapy and it was approved in the EU. It went through clinical trials and everything, and they tried to sell it for $1 million, and no insurance company would cover it and nobody could afford it. And so what happened was that eventually they just said, look, we're not going to make this anymore because it's too expensive to, keep the regulatory approval. Because when you have regulatory approval, you have to make a certain amount of the drug every year. You have to make sure it's not expired. You have to keep all these facilities and stuff like that. And so they're like, we're just going to let the regulatory approval lapse. So there is this gene therapy that we know can cure this disease, lipoprotein lipase deficiency, that people suffer from. And nobody's making it because of regulatory approval, regulatory environment, and a company can't make money off of it. So it's crazy. It's like, insane. Does that just blow your mind? Literally a cure for this disease, a cure is sitting there. It exists, but nobody's making it.
I was so shocked when they came down on 23andMe, which is if anyone's watching from Australia, a lot of people here use Ancestry.com. But 23andMe is this service where you put in a sample of your bodily fluids and it sends you back all this information. Now it sends you back history of your ancestry, but it also was sending you back information that could help you know which diseases you may be specifically prone to. What do you have a higher likelihood of getting? What should you keep an eye out for? And the FDA shut this down in the United States because they said, no. If people want that information, they should go to a doctor. People should not have the ability to self-diagnose. They should not have the ability to research things themselves. I don't know about you, but I go to a doctor and you're always getting all kinds of misinformation. I get a lot of the things that help me from doing my own research, from talking to smart people that I know, and so the idea that I did have an empowering tool that could say, oh, Naomi, watch out. You might have a higher risk of breast cancer. You might have a higher risk of, something else. That sort of thing is so helpful. And for the FDA to then say, we're protecting you by saying, no, you can no longer get access to that information in the United States. So I ended up doing the test while I was living in Canada. Because it wasn't illegal there. So, it's just the USA that shut down this side of 23andMe. And that made me so infuriated that they were disempowering individuals from being able to be proactive about their health. And that's what I feel about this whole movement. What you're doing is encouraging people to be proactive, encouraging them to, take their health into their own hands, to take science into their own hands, to take illness treatment into their own hands. And you have these centralized bureaucracies that are disempowering individuals.
No, it's really interesting about that stuff, right? Because the U.S. Is really starting to actually fall behind. They're falling behind Europe. They're falling behind China in a lot of these things because they're, under this guise of protecting people when in fact it's not. There's this common assumption that's just perpetuated right now in the US, and that is that a large portion of the electorate, or just, like people, are stupid, and like they're fools and can be taken advantage of and are dumb. And it's totally not true, right? It's totally not true. And we just keep perpetuating that they're like, people are stupid. People are stupid. And it's like, no, like people can make choices for themselves, right? People can. Like, and we need to empower those people to be able to make those choices.
Yeah, I think we
Stop
have.
like using it as an excuse. Stop using like people are stupid as an excuse to not help people. And I think that's what it is. It's just like an excuse. Like, well, we're not going to allow people to take risks because like, they're stupid. And it's just, it's an excuse.
Yeah, absolutely. And you notice that it's never people saying, I'm stupid. It's always people saying there are
Of
other
course.
people out there who are stupid.
Right.
We need to protect them. And it's the idea that, well, if you think that you can't make this
By the
decision, you can
way,
opt.
did you know I'm a genius?
Yeah, and therefore I have the right.
Everybody else is stupid.
I have the right to say that people should make their decisions for them. I'll make my own, but people should make their decisions. I mean, we're at this time when the entire population, I feel like they're being infantilized in so many ways with like education system, being kept in this very controlled environment, rote learning things, being told like this is fact, just learn exactly what we tell you, or being, people saying like you are constantly a victim, or people saying that you can't make your own choices, or people saying that there are these elites or these technocrats that know things better than you and we should give them all control. And I think that anyone who's worked in government, anyone who's actually looked at the people who are making these decisions for us, you probably shouldn't be putting so much faith in them.
Oh my gosh.
They're probably not don't have your best interests at heart, and they're not necessarily the smartest of the bunch either. So
there's so much drama going on, especially in US politics right now, and you're just like, look, like these people are way stupider than us. Like the politicians are way stupider. If I had to like shut down my company for like 14 days, we'd be out of business. Right? Like it would be so hard to recover from that. The lack of income, not shipping anything out to people or anything like that. And like the government in the US is like doing just fine. And you're just like, what is going on here? Like, you people are so stupid. Stop fighting and arguing. Like, just get on with it. Like, do something. Like, nobody cares anymore.
Yeah. Well, I mean, they just keep kicking the can down the road with that one. It's a whole other can of worms there. It's like, it's infuriating. But no, it's fascinating also, like the pushback against your company, the pushback you've had from government, from the centralized bureaucracies. I presume that like big pharma has pushed back against you as well, people who may be making products that you may try to compete with. Have you had any like interesting things go on there?
Not necessarily pushback, but I've definitely had interesting phone calls. For sure.
Yeah. I've
definitely had people contact me and be like, we want to learn a little bit more about what you and your business are doing. And usually I'm happy to oblige because I don't really have anything to hide. But it's just like you learn a lot, back and forth. You learn a lot about them and what they're doing, and they learn a lot about you. I think it's a good give and take. But yeah, no, I've definitely had some interesting conversations. And the thing that you learn is just that like people are so behind the times. It's so funny with a lot of this stuff, and like the way things are happening and the way culture is being decentralized, and like so many people are so behind the times, right? And stuff like this podcast, and it's like a totally different type of news media that you're bringing to people, right? And funding it through donations and other things, the power chat, like that's the future. This is like the future of news media, and companies are still like this morning. No offense to the San Jose Mercury News, like they were darlings, and they came over and spent some time with me, and lovely. But like, newspaper's dead. Like nobody buys a newspaper anymore. It's like if you're still printing newspapers, like you are so distanced from the real world. It's crazy. And that's the way these pharma companies are, right? They're operating
Yeah.
in like 1970 when it's 2019, and they need to like look like in 20 years, your way of doing business could be, completely shot, right? Like people are
Absolutely. And
going to
industries
start.
are constantly changing and evolving, and we're finding better ways to do things. And maybe like individuals taking things into their own hand, maybe like funding it through crowdfunding, maybe all of that sort of like decentralized approach could be the future of the entire scientific movement.
Oh,
But talking
totally.
about like media before we leave that topic. So you have got a lot of pushback from a lot of different areas. Have you received any pushback in terms of social media? Like, if there are people who don't want you saying certain things, have you been demonetized, deplatformed? Have you been on bear the brunt of that sort of attack yet?
No, I have not, but I mean, all of us, I'm sure you do also. Like, I get a fair bit of hate on social media.
Yeah.
A lot of it's from academics and people
Huh.
who are in the traditional system. Um,
Interesting.
yeah, no, I
Is that because you're
definitely.
actually going out and doing things? And like,
Oh, burn!
oh.
I like that one. That's what I'm gonna say from now on. You just hate me because I'm going out and doing things. Like you guys are just
Yeah.
publishing papers on
Yeah,
nonsensical
publish
stuff.
about theoretical things that could possibly happen if anyone did them, which no one ever does.
I know.
It drives me. It actually, I didn't realize until you mentioned it in this chat that people weren't really working on this tech, because I've been following this for years. I've been super excited about the potential that this has, and to think that people haven't actually been doing anything with it. And is that just like US regulation? Because I mean, it seems that China is sort of moving ahead and doing some
They
experimentation
are.
here. Yeah. So, I mean,
No.
are they
Yeah,
at the
well, I mean,
forefront
like,
currently?
yeah, no. So I think the US started to move away from, well, I mean, it's never been like a true capitalistic society, but they're starting to move, you know, uh, more away. And you're starting to see a bit of backlash, the separation of the right and the left libertarians starting to grow into their own movement and fight
Mm-hmm.
for less regulation, deregulation. But you see the US is starting to become way more overregulated and less
Mm-hmm.
capitalistic. And
Yeah.
China, which is quote unquote communist, capitalistic, whatever you want to call it, is more interested in just creating treatments that work and less interested in holding people back uh, from testing out and trying out these things. So the barrier to entry in China is a lot lower
Right.
to, like, there have been 0 CRISPR experiments on humans in the US, and they've already tested it on like hundreds of people in China. Not like CRISPR directly, but like editing cells with CRISPR of people and then putting those cells back into their
Yeah.
body.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, yeah, it's crazy.
And would you
It's
say
really
that they're
crazy.
the country the most ahead at the moment? Are there other
Yeah,
countries that
no,
you're looking
I'm
to
trying
that?
to I'm trying to get my company into China right now. Like,
Hmm.
they're just like pushing forward in biotech, and they're really interested in it, and they want this stuff to happen, right? And
Yeah.
it sucks in the U.S. It is funny because I think the U.S. being, like this ultimate awesome thing, the days are numbered, right? It's
Yeah.
you can see in the distance that like it's gonna not gonna be too long till China overtakes the U.S. in GDP and output
Yeah.
in medical and scientific research and technology and all these other things.
Interesting.
It's on the horizon, right?
It was interesting, like talking about like deplatforming and all of that pushback. My CRISPR video was demonetized by YouTube.
It
So
was.
I
Wow.
put that out, and then they said this is not suitable for advertisers. I mean, it's literally a picture of me, like it was just a video of me in a mask, like using petri dishes and they were like, this is not suitable for advertisers. And so I pushed back and I asked for like a manual review, but they said no. It does things
No,
that go against FDA guidelines or something like that. And I was like,
no,
oh
it's
my
interesting that
God.
that reminds me that like on we there was a time where we were trying to run Google ads, and Google AdWord ads. And what actually happened was that they would not approve our ads because they said it was pharmaceutical advertising and all this other stuff. And we're like, no, it's not. Again, the same thing. We tried to, have them do manual review, but they're just like, nope, we can't approve this. And I was just like, what? Like, it's not, we're not advertising pharmaceuticals. We're not trying to sell drugs to people. Like, it's
we're
crazy.
Trying to
like,
sell tools of empowerment.
Yeah, educational tools or whatever. Yeah, no, it's interesting. But it's definitely something I'm aware of, and we do accept cryptocurrency. So you can't pay on our website with cryptocurrency, but we've had a number of people buy stuff with cryptocurrency. You can just email us and contact us, and we will sell you anything on our website using cryptocurrency. It's totally something we support and are open to.
You should set up a page on bitbacker.io. And people could do like orders through there. People could send you messages through there, send donations type fueling, that sort of stuff. It's a fascinating field. I'm really interested in what happens in this field. I think biohacking, I agree with you. I think this is the future. And I think this is the only future where things will actually progress, because currently we've really come to a standstill. Someone mentioned in the chat, the idea that like if we tried to invent a lot of different things that we take for granted now, a lot of different treatments, a lot of different devices today, they probably wouldn't get through the regulatory climate that we've set up. So these life-saving devices that we currently have probably couldn't get through if they were put out today. And so that scares me. It makes me think about all of the things that we're missing, all of the improvements to the quality of life that we could have, but we don't. Maybe we'd have a cure for arthritis. Maybe we would have, a cure for all kinds of things like that hurt people as they get into their old age. And so I'm really excited by the work that you do. I think it's fantastic. And I encourage everyone to check out the website. I'm just going to post a link now so that people can go and have a look there, check out what you guys have. I think I discovered you through Reason. I think they did an article about you a few years ago. And I was like, oh, this is cool. And I tried it out. I've used your products. I think they're awesome. They taught me a huge amount also about just how CRISPR works. I didn't understand that before, and now I get it because I've actually used the products.
Yeah, no, it's really interesting, like what you're talking about, because like you can't stop technology, right? Like people are like, with the thing that happened recently with the researcher, the scientist who was in China who edited embryos. Like you can't stop this stuff. Like once technology is understood and people work on it, like you can't unknow the information, the knowledge. Like we can't go back. We can't not have genetic engineering. What we can try to do is we can try to, build it from the ground up so it's accessible, so people have access to it, right? So that it prevents like social classes disproportionately having access to genetic engineering or something like that. But what we can't do is even if you outlaw this stuff, even if it was completely outlawed in the US, I know in Germany, genetic engineering, doing this stuff, DIY genetic engineering, it's outlawed.
Wow.
Right? But like people order kits from us and we ship them to Germany still. Don't tell. No, I mean, I would say don't tell the German government, but they've already sent me a lot. Like the ambassador in the US from the German government, I've gotten contacted from like the FDA in Germany and all these places. And I'm like, fuck no, I'm not telling you who buys kits from us. Like, no way. No, but like people do. You can't stop it. Like, how? You can't like have a dog that sniffs for DNA. Like DNA is everywhere. So it's like, it's unstoppable. The technology is going to happen. It's going to be there. So like, we need to figure out a way to help it go forward and help it go forward properly instead of trying to stop it, because it's not going to be stopped.
Because then you just push it underground and you think about all the use cases for underground medicines. I mean, that's when you start to get into the dark, scary territory. It's better that this stuff is actually explored on the surface, actually explored in daylight, so we can use this properly, learn about it, use it safely. And that's really the only way that I see us being able to move forward and keep progressing and helping people.
Yeah, no, I
Yeah.
totally agree. I totally agree with
Cool.
that.
Well, I just want to say huge thank you to everyone who sent through a power chat. They were all anonymous, so I can't thank you by name, but I really, really appreciate
But
your
send us
support
some
there.
power chats. Send us
Absolutely.
some power
Well,
chats.
you set up an account. When you do, I'll tweet out the link so that everyone knows where to send power chats to you if they want to, support what you're doing there, or if they wanted to buy products using crypto or any of that stuff. So I can help you with that. But huge thank you for chatting with me. We've run out of time, but the work you're doing is tremendously important, and I
Thank
wish you
you.
all the best with it. And I thank you for creating a really fun product that I had a great time putting together. It was like a
No,
weekend
no.
project for me, and I loved it.
Thank you for inviting me on this show. It was really fun. It's really
Yeah,
great to chat with you. It was awesome.
absolutely. Thank you to everyone who is. Oh, what's going on?
Oh,
Beep.
I think it's a smoke detector.
All right, I'm just going to mute you as I
Somebody.
There we go. I just muted him while while I just say goodbye, and then I'll turn it back on afterwards. But thanks to everyone who's in the chat there. I appreciate you being here. I am still in Australia, so time zones are a little strange, and my chats are later than they usually are. But I really appreciate you guys being here, and appreciate you being interested in this topic. So it's super important. And everyone, check out their website, check out what they're doing, and their educational resources there. It's really awesome. But thank you so much, Josiah.
Yeah.
It's just great
Thank
to
you
have you
for
on the
having me
show.
on. Thank you
Yeah.
for having me on. It's awesome.
All right. Have a wonderful rest of your evening. Everyone have a wonderful rest of your evening or rest of your day, and I will chat to you all soon.
Yeah, and hit me up if anybody wants to chat. You know, I'm on social media, easy to find.
Yeah.
Feel free to hit me up if you want to chat.
Awesome. I'll put all your links in the info for the video as well.
Great.
All right. Bye.